The American dream just derailed into a massive sinkhole of dollar bills. Back in 2020, the pitch was a CA promised a 33B train, a shiny symbol of progress and cutting-edge tech. Fast forward to 2026, and the bill is a total gut punch. No track, 231B gone. How did your hard-earned cash evaporate into a project that hasn't even laid a single operational rail? What went down with the California promised a 33B train is arguably the biggest infrastructure scandal in our nation's history. A straight-up black hole of no track, 231B gone. You've got to see how this financial engineering managed to break every record for incompetence. So do yourself a favor and subscribe to the channel right now. We pull back the curtain on the stuff the mainstream media won't touch, so you never get played by fake promises of progress again. We're pushing for a goal of 1,000 subscribers to beef up our community of sharp investors and fed-up citizens, and having you on board is exactly what we need to hit that mark today. Topic 1. The bullet train dream and the 2020 promise. You know, we really need to take a step back and realize that humans are suckers for a grand vision. Back in 2008, California was selling a dream that looked like pure gold, a high-speed rail zipping across the state. The promise was that by 2020, you'd be gliding from LA to San Francisco in under 3 hours. Dirt cheap and green as can be, all for a paltry $33 billion. It was supposed to be the gold standard for political accountability, or at least that's what they fed us while selling tickets to a ride that didn't even have tracks yet, but already owned the hearts of anyone craving a modern future. To really get a feel for those days, think back to the launch of the first iPhone. Tech optimism was through the roof, and people bought into the idea that infrastructure would move as fast as a Silicon Valley app. If you want to understand how hype can totally blind technical judgment, I highly recommend picking up Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He nails why we fall for the planning fallacy by ignoring glaring risks just to keep a pretty narrative alive. At that point, taxpayer money felt like a bottomless pit to fund a green utopia that promised to turn the Golden State into the next Japan, minting jobs and connecting economic hubs like never before. It's like that one friend who decides to flip a whole house on a shoestring budget, convinced they won't find a single leaky pipe or old wiring behind the walls. You feel me? The project was built on a foundation of pure hopium, where every mile of concrete was pitched as a miracle for the climate, totally ignoring the nightmare of geological hurdles and the legal dogfights waiting just around the bend. The big takeaway here, which goes for both the government and your personal portfolio in infrastructure funds like PAVE or IFRA, is that a promise without a bulletproof backup plan is just a VIP invite for massive mismanagement. Topic 2. The 2026 reality and the budget abyss. The calendar turned, the hype dried up, and what we're left with is a fiscal disaster that would make any CPA's head spin. Here we are in 2026, and the math didn't just fail. It imploded. From that original $33 billion, projections are now screaming past the $231 billion mark, and the craziest part, you still can't even buy a ticket to go anywhere. Your taxpayer money was sucked dry by a Byzantine bureaucracy and land battles that turned every inch of track into some of the most expensive real estate on the planet, all without a single train ever leaving the station. To give you an idea of how insane this is, imagine you put a down payment on a Toyota, and 6 years later, the dealer tells you that you've already paid for a Ferrari, but they're still trying to figure out where to put the tires. In reality, what we're seeing in California is a textbook case of systemic mismanagement, where contracts were signed before they even knew what kind of dirt they were digging into. If you want to see how big corporations and governments hide these financial black holes, it's worth watching Enron, the smartest guys in the room. It shows exactly how ego mixed with creative accounting can lead to a budget blowout of epic proportions. The money seems to have vanished into a maze of endless consultants and constant project pivots that never actually produce anything, creating a literal black hole in the state's economy. If you're a savvy investor, you know that keeping an eye on cash flow is everything. And what's happening here is the ultimate red flag for an infrastructure fail in modern American history. It's a brutal lesson in how a lack of transparency and botched large-scale management can turn a symbol of progress into a monument of waste, leaving the average Joe holding the bag for something he might never even get to use. Topic 3. The sunk cost fallacy. It's fascinating, and honestly a bit scary, to see how the human brain refuses to admit a mistake when the price of ego is too high. We're stepping into the sunk cost fallacy zone here, where decision-makers keep throwing good money after bad just because they've already spent billions and feel like they can't quit now. In California's case, the project has become an emotional hostage. Admitting it's a bust would mean owning up to the fact that an entire generation's taxpayer money was flushed. So the political move is to double down on a budget blowout that has no end in sight. To apply this to your own life today, think about that stock that keeps tanking, or that business idea that's clearly a dud, but you keep at it just because I already put so much time into it. A wise investor reads The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb to understand how catastrophic events and irrational moves can be dodged if you have the guts to cut your losses early. The government, unfortunately, doesn't have that accountability filter. They'd rather keep the mismanagement machine humming just to avoid the political heat of admitting the train is actually a bridge to nowhere. This stubbornness to keep the project on life support, even as the cost hits $231 billion, creates a ripple effect that starves other vital areas like public safety and basic education. It's the perfect example of how not having an exit strategy can turn a vision of the future into an anchor that drags the whole economy down. If you want to be a top-tier strategist, the first step is learning to spot these money pits before they get too big to handle, protecting your capital from fairy tales that ignore the basic math of reality. Topic 4. Global comparison and the decline of U.S. engineering. Look, it's a tough pill to swallow when we look abroad and see what the rest of the world is pulling off for a fraction of what we're spending. While California is tied up in an unprecedented infrastructure fail, countries like Japan have been running the Shinkansen with split-second precision for decades, and China built the world's largest high-speed network in less time than it takes us to finish an environmental impact study. The contrast is a total gut punch. The cost per mile in the U.S. has become so bloated by lawsuits and a lack of skilled labor that the world's biggest economy seems to have forgotten how to build the basics with accountability. For those who like to get into the why behind things, I recommend the book How Big Things Get Done by Bent Flyvbjerg. He breaks down exactly why projects like the California Rail fail while others thrive. The difference isn't a lack of cash. After all, taxpayer money is being sprayed around by the billions. It's the lack of speed and the muddying of a clear purpose in a sea of state bureaucracy. It's like comparing a lean, mean startup to a corporate dinosaur that needs 10 meetings just to pick the color of a screw, resulting in a level of mismanagement the whole world is watching from the sidelines. This tech and management gap isn't just about trains. It's a massive warning sign for our global edge in the 21st century. If we can't link two cities in the same state without it turning into a $231 billion fiscal disaster, how are we going to lead the way in energy or space? It's a wake-up call for every citizen and investor. We need to demand that American engineering goes back to being a synonym for efficiency, not a name for an orgy of overspending that has no bottom. Topic 5. The uncertain future and lessons for the investor. At the end of the day, what we're left with in 2026 is a mess of pieces, where the original plan to link the state has been downgraded to a tiny starter track in the Central Valley between Merced and Bakersfield. It's what they call in the business saving face, burning a few more billion in taxpayer money just so they can say they delivered something, even if it's not what was on the brochure. For you, the smart money seeker, the biggest lesson here is knowing how to spot a zombie project. It's still moving, but it's already dead inside due to mismanagement and zero economic logic. If you want to shield your net worth from these kinds of collapses, I'd check out Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order by Ray Dalio. It helps you see how crumbling infrastructure is often a symptom of much bigger economic cycles. Watching the fiscal disaster in California should be a filter for your own investments in muni bonds or major development funds. If the governance is trash and accountability is ghosting, the risk of your capital going up in smoke is sky high. Studying cases like this gives you the street smarts to not fall for guaranteed profit pitches that rely on government handouts with no real deadlines. The future of this train is still a total fog, but the lesson etched in stone is that transparency is the only cure for corruption and incompetence. Stay sharp for red flags in any project, whether it's a high-speed rail or a new AI tech. If the costs double while the deadlines triple, it's time to jump ship. Now, the big challenge is figuring out how to demand that our nation's next steps are taken with the same grit and efficiency that made us world leaders in the first place, ensuring that tax dollars build bridges to the future, not monuments to failure. Conclusion. Now that you've seen the guts of this $231 billion disaster, the question is, how long are you going to sit there and let your hard work be turned into monuments of incompetence? Knowledge without action is just entertainment, and the lesson from California's fail is that your silence is the fuel for the next budget blowout. Are you ready to be the investor who spots these red flags before the crowd? Or are you going to keep waiting for a train that's never pulling into the station? The world doesn't play nice with people who ignore the math of reality, so start applying that critical eye to everything you do, from your portfolio to how you demand accountability. If you're done being a bystander while public money burns, and you want to master the strategies that actually protect your future, subscribe to the channel right now and hit those notifications. Our goal is to hit 1,000 subscribers to prove there's an audience that's actually hungry for the technical truth, and your sub is the proof that you're part of that informed circle.